today, we're going to be looking at the Acebeam Terminator M2, and this is probably one of the most unique flashlights that I've ever owned, and I just really like how companies these days are pushing the boundaries with their flashlight designs. And you see a lot of those forums, people just arguing about whether you should get a throwy or a floody flashlights. I think lights like this certainly eliminate that debate on whether you should carry around one or another when you can pretty much have both in the same package. And you know, I've seen lots of dual beam lights. I'm going to show you some of the ones that I own as well, and they have different designs. This one has a sort of slab design, and you can see with a lot of the previous dual beam flashlights, they actually come with a more tube design. Like I said, I'll show you them in a moment. And with the tube design, especially when you have tons of different LEDs, it tends to be quite large in diameter, whereas I think having this design here with two different beams actually makes it more compact. And Acebeam have solved this problem by creating separate lenses for the spot projection and the flood beam. And you look down this little spot beam, it really reminds me of looking down the opposite end of some binoculars. I think it's a genius design. I have a whole bunch of these other dual beam flashlights here, and I'll probably let's start with the left hand side. So over here it's my LED Lenser P6R Core QC, and this one here has this rotational design, so you select between the different colored beams, but as well as sort of you pull and you push back in this lens, and it creates a spot and a flood beam, as you can see here. So that's one way to do it, and LED Lenser actually have the patent for this technology, so you don't really see too many lights out there. I think this is the only one really that has this technology, this brand anyway. And this is also another LED Lenser light that I have, and they also use this same kind of sort of zoomy lens, but instead of pulling and pushing, you're twisting this time, okay? And it moves that lens, as you can see, a little bit further away and closer to the LED, depending on how you want to focus the beam, as you can see here, okay? So that's one way to do it, and it's expensive if you're a consumer because they do charge a premium on top of that technology. Here's another design that also solves that issue of having both throw and flood beam. It's Workhorse HD20. You've got a floody one at the bottom and a throwy beam at the top. And Workhorse are using a TIR lens, basically TIR lenses for both, but they're using a larger TIR lens for the throwy spot beam. Okay, but yeah, this can get pretty hot, and because you're fitting on two different LEDs onto this small area here on this tube design, you're definitely not going to get as much throw as if you've got separate tubes like in the M2. Here's another one, the Woburn L1, and they solve this problem in the Workhorse of having, I guess, a smaller lens and a larger lens for the throwy one, just so that they can both fit on to the actual host by actually adding in two different LEDs, but they've got this rotating design, okay, as you can see here. So you've got two pretty large lenses, one for flood and one for throw. That solves that issue, but it introduces another issue of cooling, because I find that when you've got this rotating design, there's a little space in the center there where the head of the light just doesn't make contact with the rest of the body, so it does get pretty hot and step down faster in my experience, but it's still a pretty good design. Here are a couple others that have another design, one that I was mentioning before, that can be pretty bulky, very effective, but very bulky. If you don't mind the size of the flashlights, you can see here, it's basically just a really large head, very large bezel. We've got all the lights, all the LEDs just put together, and you've got two different style of reflectors, one big one for the throwy LED and lots of these little ones, but essentially a similar sort of design. The Immolent MR90, it's just on a larger scale, there's fans, it's a bit more fancy. This is the Sofern IF30. Okay, so these both accomplish that throw and flood beam, but again, pretty large, hefty. You're not going to be able to carry this around with you, but again, this design is really suited for those lumen monster flashlights because you've got that bulk of heat sinking material. There's no way you're going to put this many LEDs onto a small host like one of these to the left and not expect them to burn out or cause some issues after some time. So yeah, let's go a bit into the design of the M2. Just thought I'd show you also a really quick preview of what you get with the box, with the light. It's a pretty small sort of box, simple box. It's got some information here on the front. You can see here there's two different combos. Get the 6500K version, the higher lumen one. I got this one sent to me as a free sample from Acebeam, and they have sent me this for the purposes of this review. They actually sent me the 2000 lumen model. As you can see here, the high CRI model. You get this charging cable in here as well, USB-C charging. You've got a lanyard, you've got a instruction manual, and of course you get the battery, which is an 18650 cell, Acebeam 18650 cell, 3100 milliamp. And you can see here there's a USB-C charging port on there. There's no charging port on the actual light itself. Alrighty, so here is a little close-up of the Acebeam Terminator M2, and I'm really impressed with the machining. It's high quality, very well constructed, and the first thing I thought of when I got this light, took it out of the package, is that it just feels like I'm holding some kind of military device or precision tool, almost like a night vision device or something like that. It's just so well machined and has a fantastic finish on it as well. It's a very kind of matte black finish, chalky matte black finish. Looks to be quite durable as well. And as you can see, the light has this sort of slab design, which makes it surprisingly easy to carry in your pocket. Because when you put it in, it actually doesn't take out that much bulk. It doesn't sort of stick out of your pocket like when you've got a larger head, flashlight head. Especially, it sort of juts out of your pocket. I really like these cutouts on the light as well. Intricate cutouts here on the side. There's not any room to put a tritium vial. Could almost look like they were going to do that here for these three bits on the front there. But they're tasteful looking cutouts. There's no rough or sharp spots, inconsistencies as well. And yeah, like I mentioned before, I really like that anodizing because of it's just really low reflective, matte black, feels very high quality, and it's also grippy as well. So if we look down the head of the flashlight, you can see here there's two different lenses. So you've got the left side here, we've got these 3x TIR lenses, and I've got the Nichia 519A version, three of them sitting behind 5000K, and I think 5000K is a great tint. I think anything below that when using outside, it's just a little bit too warm in my opinion. And like I said before, you can get this one in the 6500K model, 3200 lumens, and normally that's the version I select if I go purchase a light, because I don't really, for me when I'm out, it's more visibility is important to me. I don't really care so much about the color rendering. I'm not sure what LEDs the other one has. It's not stated on the Acebeam website. I do think that they're Osram P9s though. And you can see the other side here is a system I've not really seen before in a flashlight design. So it appears to be some kind of focusing lens, some glass lens system in there, and it creates a very clean, uniform, perfectly circular beam with a bit of spill as well. I'd say that it reminds me of a beam from an LEP flashlight, except there is definitely more spill than you get on an LEP. It's non-existent on LEP, whereas this one is a tiny little bit of soft spill. But most of the light, I'd say about 90 to 95% of the light is focused in that centralized hotspot. Both of the bezels as well here on the front, they are slightly crenulated. And the lenses are recessed in there, which is good, protects the lenses. Alright, so I want to go through the UI and just show you how the light is operated. So firstly, you can see here on the body, there is a switch. It says floodlight and spotlight. Little cautionary message here on the side. I wish I didn't include that. Doesn't matter too much though. And you can see here on the top the different beam profiles. That's like the throwy beam, that's the floody beam as indicated. But basically you swap between the two LEDs, the two different beams by flicking this switch. So from off, assuming that the light is unlocked, press this button here on the back. So there's only just one sort of button there on there, and it just turns it on to the last mode that was memorized. Okay, that's the flood. I'm on the floodlight mode, and you can press and hold to cycle up between the 4 different modes. That's the high mode. Double press from any mode, and you can get the turbo mode. It does not memorize turbo. It memorizes everything up until the high mode. And as you saw before as well, 4 clicks gives you a strobe. And let's have a look. Oh, another thing you can do, you can turn the light off and you can press and hold on this floodlight mode, and it gives you a nice little moonlight mode. This is not memorized though, so every time you turn it on, it's just going to memorize whatever of the 4 steps in there. Okay, so normally I just leave it on the low mode like that. Okay, and you can switch this over to spotlight and press the button on the back, and you get a really, really strong hotspot. I mean, it's just so intense. I can't actually look at this thing up close, but it's a really nice bright white color. So you can also activate both beams by triple clicking on any mode. So you can be on either the spot or the flood mode, and yeah, you get both spot and flood on turbo. Best of both worlds, really powerful. Another thing you can do is you can lock the flashlight. So basically either from any of these modes, flood or spotlight, just press and hold the back button, and you'll see it just go blink 3 times, 4 times like that. And that's when you know that the light is locked. And whenever you try to activate the light, you see here this little auxiliary indicator on the side here just blinks green like that. This is also a battery indicator as well, and it turns red when the battery falls below a certain point. I think it's about 25%. And as you can see here, if I held down that button for longer than 3 seconds, it will unlock the flashlight. Okay, so lock, just flashes, unlock, press down for a few seconds again, and there you go, it's unlocked. Now Acebeam mentioned that the spotlight can only be activated on the highest mode, but I found a little bug in this light that allows you to activate a low mode of spotlight. So basically you lock the light in spot. Okay, so just like that, it's locked, and you press and hold again while it's in spot, keep on holding, and as it unlocks, you get a low mode of the spot. So this will probably give you some extra run time. I wish they had included this in the UI, the normal UI though. And the last thing I want to show you is this really cool feature. It's basically the auxiliary mode. So before the light locks, you're holding down that back button. Now before the light locks, what will happen is that, there you go, you've got it goes to this mode where it just cycles between these colored LEDs here, the 7 different colors. Okay, and you have to just lift off the button just before it locks. So the auxiliary load modes will start to cycle and then let go. If you hold it for a bit longer, the light will lock. And from here, you can press and hold the back button to select a bunch of auxiliary light modes. You got red, you've got green, and green is the brightest of all the selectable auxiliary modes in here. So great for like a reading light for just general visibility up to a couple of meters. Got a blue mode. You've got this signal flashing signal light here. So it's just green and it blinks a couple of times like that. And you've got this SOS mode here as well. Okay. And just basically goes back to the same mode. So you press again to switch off. Okay, so I ran a bunch of ceiling bounce tests to see how the light performs on a bunch of different modes. This is the first one here. This is with the spot plus flood mode on turbo. And you can see that the light holds 100% or just below 100% all the way up to 1.5 minutes onwards. I'd say about 1 minute 45 before the light steps down, and it steps down to around 30%. You can see just before the 6-minute mark, I reactivate the Spot Plus Flood Turbo, the triple click feature, and it jumps up and then goes back down. So that indicates to me that there is some type of temperature regulation in the flashlight. It's not a timer. That's a good thing. It doesn't feel hot at all when I activate both of these modes. It does feel a little bit warm, especially near the head, but it doesn't get excessively hot. I think this is pretty impressive to have nearly 2 minutes of complete 100% runtime on both modes, and the fact that you can reactivate that very quickly with a few clicks in case you need that burst of light. I think that's a great feature. A lot of lights don't allow you to do that. Here is a second ceiling bounce test I ran, and you can see I've just activated the flood mode on turbo, and you do get some extra runtime. So I got about 2.5 minutes to 3 minutes of runtime on the turbo mode, which is super impressive. It's 2000 lumens for 2.5 plus minutes there before the light actually steps down to about 50% output. And you can see the light just continues to hold that 50% until the end of the test. Here is a third ceiling bounce test, and this is just with the spot beam, and you can see it starts out at 100%, and just after the 1 minute mark, you can see the light drop down to about 40% output. So you do get about a minute of runtime on the spot mode, pretty good. And I activated it again, turned it off and reactivated it, and it jumps up to 100% and immediately comes back down. So that again is indicating that there is some type of temperature regulation in there. It's good news because you don't want the light to damage itself, burn out, or anything like that. So it's good to see Acebeam have done the right thing here. This is a final ceiling bounce test, and this one was really impressive. As you can see, I have the light on the flood mode, on the high mode, which is basically the fourth step, and starts out at 100%, starts dropping very, very slightly, but you can see it basically maintains about 95 to 100% output for the entire duration of the test. I ran the test past the 45-minute mode. So it's good to see that on that highest mode there's nice sustained brightness and output from the M2. I also ran a bunch of tests on my Opal Lightmaster Pro, and you can see here on the spot mode, high spot mode, I measured 549 meters of throw. Really impressive, and that's above spec as well. I did test that on switch on though, and CCT for the spot beam was 5,918. So yeah, it's definitely a lot cooler, kind of like a white, cool white color. And on the flood modes, as you can see, basically on the turbo mode, I got 143 meters of throw. This was slightly below spec, but again, I'm using my Opal Lightmaster Pro. It's not a precision instrument. It's not a professional instrument, so there might have been some fluctuation there. And you can see the CCT ranging from 4,400 all the way to 4,800. So it does get close to that 5,000K mark. I really like the spot beam on this flashlight. It's just perfectly circular and uniform. There's something really satisfying about it. It looks like a projected beam, and the spill beam is very useful. Lots of spill, and just having that large hot spot, especially when you're triple clicking, gives you the best of both worlds. Some considerations to keep in mind with this flashlight: it is a bit awkward to hold, as you can see. I'm still not 100% sure how to hold this thing, but I find myself just holding it more this way, kind of like that, and I'll use my thumb to flick in between the different modes. And when I was hanging out with my my friend Tim and doing some beam shot tests, we ended up also holding it this way as well, kind of like a cigar hold where you're using your thumb and pressing it that way. Okay, so the design does have obviously some slight ergonomic challenges, but I wouldn't say that it's a big deal at all. I mean, I can get by with it. Still feels fairly comfortable. The fact that there are two tubes here sometimes makes it difficult because I am fumbling around trying to figure out which tube to press, but again, it's one or the other. I do wonder if Acebeam could have designed this light so that we could fit in a second 18650 cell. Maybe make a reflector instead of a lens here for this spot beam, for the spot lens, obviously. But again, it's a tricky scenario because without that second lens tube, we just wouldn't have that amazingly clean spot beam. And for me, I would rather have that beam than have that secondary battery in there. I know it sounds more practical to have that second one in there, but it's just such a aesthetically pleasing beam, really throwy beam, that I wouldn't want to give that up. I also thought that perhaps the switch here, this could be changed around the design, maybe have the switch here on the same button, so there'd be like a rotation switch or something like that on the side, so that I could, basically switch between, or even have it on the second battery tube, who knows. A second consideration is that there's no onboard charging, but of course that included 18650 does have a USB-C port. I wish this could accept a 21700 cell, but looking at the other model, the Terminator M1, it does make it quite large and reasonably large, in my opinion, for carrying around EDCing. So I do like the fact that this one is quite easy to just fit in your pocket with that 18650. Third consideration, like I mentioned before, is that there is no other brightness modes when you're in the spot mode except high. And it is a little bit difficult to activate that low mode, which is I think is more of a bug in there, but it's good to see that you can activate that if you need. But again, this could be a pro for some people because it means that you're always going to be in that highest mode when you're using spot, and that's a pretty good self-defense feature, if you're someone that just needs to maximize on that spot beam straight away. Overall, the Acebeam Terminator M2 really surprised me. I just didn't expect much from this light initially, and I was expecting to get some kind of gimmicky flashlight with an impractical design, just something that would look cool but would be difficult to use. But instead, I really think that the M2 is one of my favorite flashlights, and it's made it into my top 5 EDC flashlights. It's certainly on the larger end of EDCs, but it's incredibly versatile. That flood beam provides ample light for any scenario. You've got those auxiliary modes as well to save on power. You've got a few emergency SOS and the beacon mode as well. Moonlight modes on both. And the spot beam. I really like this spot beam. It satisfies my throw needs. And that's, surprises me because it does say a lot. I have tons of throwers in my collection, so if I'm happy with this one, I'm sure you're going to be happy with it as well. And like I said, there's auxiliary lights. I find that I do use them quite a lot at night as well, just to light up in front of me if I don't want to turn on any of the other lights to blind myself. But very surprised to say this, but I highly recommend this light. If you're interested in this flashlight, check out the link in the description. You'll be able to get a discount with my code. And if you have any questions, just let me know down in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you. There's probably some things here or there that I've missed out on, so just let me know. If you enjoyed the video, you found it helpful, do me a big favor and like the video and share it with a friend. It doesn't cost you a cent and it really helps me to get my videos out to more people so I can continue doing what I do. And if you want to see more flashlight reviews, keep up to date with the latest flashlight news, make sure you subscribe. Acebeam Terminator M2, and this is on the flood mode. Okay, just go through the 4 steps. First step, second, third, fourth, turbo. So you can just sort of see near to the edge where that sign is, and maybe 3 or so trees down, but behind that you can't really see anything. Now put on the Spot Plus flood mode on turbo, and you can see pretty well. Like, that lens just focuses everything just perfectly. It's amazing. And I'll switch it over to just the spot mode. Somehow it seems brighter on the spot mode alone, but it might just be because you don't have that sort of spill to emphasize. But yeah, you can see there's very little spill. I can see a tiny bit around near where my feet are, but apart from that, nothing. But this thing just projects incredibly through the night. And especially where you need to see down those, you know, like a path like that, where you just want to see what's down the end there. Light like this really does come in handy. That's with both Spot Plus Flood. What a handy combination to have. Jeez, what a monster. Terminator M2, and we'll put it straight onto the spot mode. And you can see how powerful this is. It reaches the trees right through the center of that clearing, and around the edges it's just this perfect spot beam. Lots of mosquitoes here. I'm just trying not to move around too much, but you can see, look at that. It's like a perfect spot beam, and there is a little bit of spill, but most of the light is going straight through the center of this beam here. It's a very clean sort of beam. It reminds me of that, like an LEP beam, but there is a little bit of spill at least. Okay. The flood beam, first step, second, third, fourth. Okay, then it just cycles again. 1, 2, 3, 4, and turbo. Jeez, quite impressive. It's reaching the trees all the way out the back as well. And what we can do is combine the spot and the flood beams, like that. best of both worlds. I'm glad that Acebeam included this feature, because the spill isn't super bright on the spot beam. And you see how I just reset it, turn it off, reactivate with that triple click, and you've got that little bit of that turbo runtime again. It's not a huge host, so it does step down pretty quickly, but even when it does, still quite a useful beam, bright enough to do most things. And just holding it as well, it's not even hot, it's just slightly warm. I wouldn't say it's hot at all, but it is about 18 degrees here today in Melbourne, tonight in Melbourne. So yeah, if it was about 30 degrees, I think we'd have a different story here. Just the flood again. Flood and spot. And let's switch back just to the spot beam. Wow. Such a clean looking hot spot.
From all the way up there, might have been a... probably was. What was it? Do you reckon that was a kangaroo from up there?
Maybe.
Probably was just chilling
It was
out,
standing real
sleeping.
still.
Yeah, it was probably like its back or something. I got the promo.
Just disappeared. This is the Acebeam Terminator M2 on the spot beam. Very nice, focused, hotspot. See so much detail up in the trees there. It throws such a long distance, but the hotspot's quite large, which is useful for spotting in a larger area. I'll turn on the flood as well, so flood plus spot. In fact, it's can't really see too much of a difference because the flood isn't really reaching the back. Let me just try switching it over to the flood mode. As you can see, it's very difficult to see. I can just make it out. And the Acebeam Terminator M2. It's not an LEP, but it's a LED that's in a sort of lens configuration. It reminds me a lot of an LEP. I really want to see more companies do this. It's just such a clean looking beam and maximum throw as well in such a small like diameter lens. So here's one of the M2s. Tim's going to turn on his M2 as well.
So that's 2.
Yeah.
That's a neutral white versus cool white. I think the cool white throws a bit further. Or it just seems.
Hang on, go.
Or maybe it's the same.
Hang on. Yeah. Wait. So I got the cool white version. Let me see. What the hell?
No, they said they don't have a. Yeah, that's the warm line.
Okay, oh, it's recording. Yeah.
Yep. So that's full white. Yeah, I like the cool white for identifying stuff, but just the warm white looks nicer. And the spot things a bit like something. Cool. Right.